Hello, I'm Paul Carroll, technical writer for Digital Photo Magazine, and welcome to part 1 of this month's Digital Darkroom video tutorial on applying duotone effects in Photoshop. Duotoning is a great way to tone monochrome prints, using either 1, 2, 3 or even 4 different coloured inks to add tone selectively to the highlights, midtones or shadows. Duotone effects have to be applied in a specific image mode that only contains a single grayscale channel, instead of the 3 red, green and blue channels we're used to working with in the RGB image mode. Because duotones work in a true monochromatic state, the toning applies virtual inks to reproduce tinted grey values, so we actually end up with a toned grayscale image. Pretty clever, hey? And because duotone images don't have separate coloured channels, we have to manipulate how the coloured inks are applied across the tonal range by adjusting a curve line for each of the inks. In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at doing an advanced duotone effect using 2 inks. Firstly, a black ink, which will retain the dark shadows and bright highlights to really retain that authentic black and white feel, as well as a second ink, which is the aqua blue, and applies the toning effect. Once we've applied the blue ink to tone the image, we're then going to adjust the curve line for that blue ink so that we reduce the density of the toning which is applied to our lighter tonal values, and that's going to bring through some of these really bright white highlight areas that you can see on the left and towards the bottom of the picture, which is just going to really add some more impact and make a more dramatic picture. Okay, let's get started. I'll just close down the final image which is on the screen, and then we need to open up the image from the CD, which is called Fountain. Although our start image has already been converted to black and white, it's actually still in the RGB image mode. And if I drag on my channels palette, you can see that. So we need to convert the image to the grayscale image mode. And to do that, if you go up to the image menu, down to mode, and across to grayscale, it's asking us whether we want to discard the colour information, and we do, so simply click discard, and you can see that instantly our channels palette has changed and we no longer have those 3 separate colour channels, and we're just left with a single grayscale channel. So I'll just drag that off the screen for a minute, get it out of the way. Next thing we need to do is we need to convert the image into the duotone image mode. So again, go up to the image menu, down to mode, and this time we want the third option down from the flyout menu, duotone. That launches our duotone dialog box, and it's within here that we're going to apply all of the changes to tone our image. You can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different ink options, and at the moment only ink 1 is active because in the type box we've selected monotone. So now to apply a duotone effect, all we need to do is click on the downward arrow next to the type box and select duotone from the list, and now you can see that ink 2 has also become active. Just before I apply the second ink to tone that aqua blue that we're going to tone with, if I just drag the duotone dialog box to the corner, I'm just going to explain the curve line a little bit more. If I click on the curve line next to ink 1, and it's in this box here, we get the duotone curve box appear. And it's in here that we can make adjustments to the curve line. So again, I'm just going to move that down here so we can see the effect that adjusting the curve has on the image. The standard curve line is a straight diagonal line running from the bottom left hand corner, which represents the brightest tonal values in the image, up to the top right hand corner, which represents the darkest tonal values in the image. And at the moment our black ink is being mapped in equal densities from a 0 density in the brightest highlights, and that's represented by this 0 box, up to the densest blacks up at the 100 box, which again represents the darkest tonal values in our image. So say I wanted to darken this image and apply more black toning ink to the midtone values, then I would need to increase the density of black ink which is applied to the midtones. So the midtones are represented by the 50 box, and at the moment there's 50% ink being applied to them, and you can see that if I input a figure of 50%, the curve line remains that straight diagonal line from the bottom left to the top right. But if I increase this figure to say 75%, you can now see that we have an arced curve line, and we're applying a greater density of black ink to the midtones, which has darkened the image. Similarly, if I wanted to lighten the image and apply less black ink to the midtones, then by reducing the figure in the 50 box to say 25%, we now have an arced curved line in the opposite direction, and the image has become brighter. And you can also see now that we have some real burnt out highlights over on the left hand side of the fountain. Now in this technique I'm not going to be changing the curve line of the black ink, so I'm going to reset that curve line back to the default, click OK, but at least gives you some basic understanding of how the curve line works. Okay, let's get on and apply our aqua blue toning effect. So to add our aqua blue toning ink, simply click on this colour box which is adjacent to ink 2. You can see at the moment it's set to white, and by clicking in there I launch the colour libraries. Now most of us are going to be familiar with the colour picker, so we're not going to use the colour libraries palette to select our colour. And if we just simply click on the third button down on the right hand side which says picker, we launch the colour picker. Now when you're choosing which colour you'd like to tone with, you can use the vertical colour bar to select the a rough hue and then the exact shade from the colour box, but I know the exact tonal values or RGB values that I want to use for this image, so I'm going to enter them into the RGB boxes. So it's a red of 0, a green of 200 and a blue figure of 255, and that's going to give us that aqua blue that I'm after. So just click OK, and there you go. You can see that it's instantly applied that toning ink across the monochrome image. Now I need to specify a name for my ink, otherwise it won't let me apply or save the effect. So in the name box next to ink 2, just give it a name. So I'm going to call this one aqua blue. Now at the moment the curve line for our aqua blue ink is also set to the default. Again, that straight diagonal line running from the bottom left up to the top right. And you can see from our image that we're applying quite a thick density of aqua blue toning to our mid-tone regions, and the white highlights that we do have are only the very brightest highlights in the image. So what I need to do is I need to adjust the curve line for our aqua blue ink to reduce the density of toning which is being applied to the highlight areas, but at the same time maintain that rich aqua blue tone in the mid-tone and the darker values. Now I could do that by clicking on the curve line and dragging it around a little bit, which is fine, but I find a much more accurate way of dictating how the toning effect is applied is by entering figures into these boxes here. So I'm just going to reset those figures which have been inputted by me messing about with the curve line. Now if you remember from our experiment with the black ink curve line, we have a 50% density on the default curve line in the mid-tone values. Now if I want to reduce the curve and apply less ink to the highlight areas, I need to reduce this figure. So I'm going to reduce it quite dramatically, and I'm going to enter a figure of 15%. And now you can see from our curve line that we have 0 toning ink being applied to these really bright highlight values. And you can now see the result of that on the image, that we still have those really bright highlight areas, but also a lot more of the highlights in the water of the fountain, and the water on the floor of the fountain are also becoming bright. So if I just return that to 50%, you can see that we have a much richer blue in these highlights here. But if I go to 15%, we just lighten the whole effect and we bring some more of those real bright highlights into the image. A knock-on effect, however, of reducing that toning effect in the highlights is that now the density of ink that we're applying to these darker mid-tone values has been reduced. We're still applying 100% density to the darkest points of our image, but here we're applying less density of ink, which has the effect on the image of lightening the toning effect, or reducing the richness of the toning effect. So what I need to do is I need to increase the figure in the 70% box. If I put that, say, to 75, on the default curve line it would have been around 70, so we're just pushing it ever so slightly higher than what it would be on the normal default curve line. And as you can see, the effect that that's now having on the image is really just boosting the overall toning effect in the darker shades. So all I need to do now is click OK to accept my curve, and if I click OK in the duotones dialog box, you can see that there's my final toned image. Now, to retain the duotone image mode and the toning effect so that I can come back later to it and adjust it if I want to, this document now needs to be saved as a Photoshop document, a PSD file. And you can do that by going up to the File menu and going down to Save As, and the default format which appears is the Photoshop format, so that'll be fine. But if you did want to save it as a JPEG image, JPEGs don't support the duotone image mode. So what you'd actually have to do is convert the file back to the RGB image mode. The toning effect will remain exactly the same as you see it on screen now. In fact, I'll show you. So if we go up to image, down to mode, at the moment we're in the duotone image mode, but simply click on RGB color and we go back into our RGB mode. If I drag the channels palette back onto the screen, you can see that we've lost our grayscale channel, but we now have the red, green and blue channels, and we can now save the image. If we go down to Save As, we can save it as a JPEG. Okay, I hope you've really enjoyed this technique. Give it a go using the start image off the CD, and then you can get duotoning your own images in the future. Okay, cheers.